Over half of women in South Africa's labour landscape are taking time off for mental health reasons. This is revealed in Deloitte's Women at Work report, which has identified a rise in stress levels. Chief People Officer at Deloitte, Lungile Mahluza, says the survey has also found that women are still uncomfortable with discussing their mental health or disclosing it. She joins us virtually now to further this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Lungile. Let's, I think, first engage on how these findings are hampering on the slow pace of female representation in the workplace as we see it in South Africa.
Evening, Jimmy Sang. So perhaps just a few things about the survey. It is in its fourth year. 5,000 women from across 10 countries surveyed, including South Africa. And you would think that in 2024, the issue of equity in the workplace would be uncontested. But we do see that a number of organizations are struggling with this reality, and in fact, that progress is stagnating. As you've mentioned, more than 50% of the women who completed the survey in South Africa have indicated that they're more stressed. They're concerned about their rights to earn an equal wage. They're concerned about their mental health. They are taking time off, but in fact are not disclosing why they're taking time off, and also concerned about their reproductive health.
Those are issues that are widespread, and I'm even more interested in how then companies seek to hone in on the transparency level of it, particularly by making women feel comfortable to at least identify and acknowledge an issue so that there is a mechanism that would be developed to deal with that particular issue. I mean, stress levels from the actual work that you do compared to what would be required or so-called social are two different entities on their own.
You're absolutely right. And I think when we talk about the issue of mental health, there is a lot of nuance and sensitivity because the factors that play into stress levels may, as you very rightly mentioned, be a function of societal or issues outside of work. But what we are seeing is that the organizations where women claim that they are more productive, more engaged, and generally have a more positive experience do a couple of things right. So I think first, it's in having the right sorts of policies that support women. Secondly, it is in making sure that leaders are actually modeling the right behaviors and creating an environment where even if you have those policies, women do not fear reprisal when they do, indicate that they need to take time off, for instance, for some of these issues. And then thirdly, these workplaces the women in these workplaces tend to feel that their careers are advancing at the pace that they would like. And what that talks to is creating opportunities as well as sponsorship. I think it is important to mention that, of course, these are very sensitive issues, and it's not about compelling women to disclose, but it is about creating an environment where they are comfortable to do so without fearing any reprisal.
Absolutely sensitive, and on the part of the gender pay gap, it brings me back to that initial question of female representation within the workplace where the South African labour landscape is concerned. Of course, we are seeing some progress, albeit slow, and this could be one of the major reasons, especially because the disclosure element of it is sitting on a trajectory that is quite shaky.
It is, but I think, specifically, if you're talking about the pay issue, what we are seeing is a lot more progressive organizations actually being a lot more transparent around pay and pay gaps from a gender perspective. So I do think we will start to see more and more of that. But certainly what we would hope for is that organizations would be on the front foot and not wait to respond to regulations. On the issue of representation, we are making progress, even though it's slow, but it's not just about getting the numbers right. It's about creating an environment substantively that is actually enabling and supportive. And I think that's where the real work still lies.
Traditionally, are we seeing that there is at least a corporate culture that is looking to close this gap? It does, of course, affect the bottom line if you have bodies out of the workplace for mental health reasons, a serious matter. But at the same time, it can be chucked out of the window solely as an element of medical health as opposed to a broader discourse within the workplace.
So I think it's mixed, Demisang. I think we are seeing that organizations are becoming a lot more conscious. I mean, even just having a report like this, which is, only 4 years old, and the conversation within organizations around mental health, I think, is gaining momentum. There is still, however, a stigma associated with that. And that's where I think leadership in particular plays a really important role, both in speaking about, in modeling the right kinds of behaviors, and in making just, mental well-being part of the conversation and culture of our organizations.
We are having this conversation in a forum of corporates and businesses and the labor landscape across the board in the country, but we are fast approaching the 2024 elections. To what extent should this be a bigger discussion?
I think it certainly should be. I mean, you can imagine if we think about, people holistically, the factors, whether it is the factors in the economy, certainly, and the stress that we find households under, whether it is just the political landscape, and the forthcoming elections and all the angst and conversation around that and what might play out. I mean, I just heard the previous segments actually also talking about, what might happen in terms of coalition governments and so on. These are all factors that play into, I think, the psyche of not just women, but of people in general as a nation. And I think we are seeing that mental well-being is coming to the fore, also exacerbated by, the 3 years that we had coming out of COVID. So these are factors, I think, that are becoming increasingly important. And why this conversation is important is because if you think about the impacts on productivity, if you think about the impacts on engagement in the economy and what that does, these conversations then are not just a factor of, a side conversation on health, but actually should be coming to the fore if we think of the broad-based impact.
Thank you so much for your input. Lungile Mahluza is a people officer at Deloitte talking to us about this report that is 4 years in, looking at the mental health of females in the workplace. Quite a number of interesting elements coming out of there where females are lagging behind in terms of absenteeism, but also disclosure around their mental health.